Our first story is about Polly Van Dorn. Polly Van Dorn was the most beautiful girl in all of Bernard's Township. All the boys wanted to court her, but she was very picky. She wanted somebody that was handsome and smart and well-bred. Along comes John Smith, a graduate of Princeton, who came back to town. Polly saw him. She was smitten immediately. They had a whirlwind romance and were immediately engaged. Polly spent endless nights and days with her friends, looking for things for her house, things for the wedding. John could not be bothered with this. He decided to spend his nights at the Washington House. The Washington House was known for its billiards and tavern. He would spend countless nights there. August Moore, who was the owner of the Washington House, had a daughter nothing like Polly. Polly had blonde hair and blue eyes and was gorgeous. Helen, August Moore's daughter, equally as beautiful, had dark brown hair, brown piercing eyes, and wore ruby red lipstick, and had quite the reputation. John spent night after night with Helen at the Washington House. People began to talk. Polly confronted him and said, "Enough! You can't spend your nights with Helen." He reluctantly agreed. The day of the big wedding came. Everyone in Bernard's Township came to the Presbyterian Church to attend the wedding of Polly Van Dorn and John Smith. It was a wonderful day. Polly was in one of the chambers, and she was a vision in white. Her dress, made by Mrs. Van Arnsdale from up the street, in beautiful white lace. Her veil flowed for miles. Her bouquet was orange calla lilies. The choir began to sing. The organist began to play. The guests became restless after about an hour. One guest decided to take a stroll and was walking up the street. When out of the tavern strolled two men and were laughing and saying, "Isn't it a hoot that John and Helen eloped on the very day that John was supposed to marry Polly?" Horrified, the man goes back to the church, tells Mrs. Van Dorn that Polly is not getting married today. John will not be there. Mrs. Van Dorn has to go tell her daughter that John will not be there. She tells her Polly grabs the knife that she was going to use to cut the cake and stabs herself in the heart. She dies immediately. They fix the wedding gown and bury her in her wedding gown. Everyone in town comes to the funeral. She's buried over there. As the whole town gathers for the funeral, ironically, John and Helen come back from their wedding. They come to the cemetery and are standing here wondering, what are all these people doing? Everyone turns. They see John and Helen. They are shunned. They immediately leave and never come back to town. Time passes. Years pass. John's father becomes very sick. Everyone wonders, will John attend his father's funeral? The day of the funeral happens, but John is not there. He's buried a couple blocks away from Polly. That night, after the funeral, John comes to the cemetery, stands by his father's grave, and is paying his respects. He all of a sudden hears, "John, John." He turns, he looks, he sees a spectral form, all in white, approaching him. "John, John," beckoning him to come. He starts to back away. The apparition comes closer and grabs him by the arm. His arm, pain shooting through his arm. He flees, goes back to the Bernard's Inn. As he's laying there, the pain overtakes his body. He calls for a doctor. The doctor comes, cannot figure out what is wrong with him. All of a sudden, his heart stops. He's dead. The next day, so they say, at the grave of Polly Van Dorn was a single orange calla lily. So in the end, Polly got her man.